Okay. Hi, Taryn. Thank you so much for coming on The Intersect today.
Hi, Emily. I'm so excited to be here.
Good. Well, we are so excited to talk with you and get your story. Your story just has so much to it, so much that is, it just captures so much of what we're trying to do with our organization. So we were so excited to get your story today. But I'm just going to tell our guests a little bit about you. Taryn DeLong is an editor and writer, and most importantly, a wife and mother. She is the managing editor of Catholic Women in Business and a contributing writer to Live Today Well, Natural Womanhood, and CatholicMom.com, as well as other publications. Taryn was certified to teach FEMM in 2021 and teaches it to women and couples at a pregnancy resource center in Raleigh, North Carolina. So that's awesome. We love all the work you do, and we love working with you on different projects as well. Let's go ahead and just dive right in. So whenever you reached out to us wanting to share your story, again, we were so excited because it touches on so many things that we want to talk about. But you kind of went through being on birth control, coming off of birth control, and eventually using fertility awareness. So let's just start at the beginning. What symptoms were you experiencing that led you to get on birth control? And then what was the conversation like with your doctor before it was prescribed?
Yeah, so basically from the beginning, when I, started having periods, started cycling, I experienced really long cycles, like months and months and months without a period. My periods would be really heavy and painful. So for a couple of years, it's kind of normal as your body starts learning how to cycle for things to be a little wonky. But about like 4 years into that, I was just miserable. I was just not functioning when I was on my period because of all the pain, and not being able to, predict when it was going to happen was just making my life really difficult. So I went to the gynecologist, and she listened to my symptoms, and she said, okay, sounds like you need the birth control pill. And basically just said, this will help your symptoms. And as far as I can remember, that was the extent of the conversation. So I started taking it, and the symptoms went away. I started having, what seemed like a period every month. The cramping was gone. The, really heavy bleeding was gone. And I mean, I felt pretty great. All those symptoms were gone. So I was pretty happy on birth control for a while.
I bet. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of women's experiences. But you also told us something very interesting before. You had a certain perception of people who seem to be anti-birth control. So we were wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that and how that contrasted with your perception of birth control before actually getting on it. So the doctor presented you with this idea, this prescription. What was your perception of it? Or people who are on the other side of the fence, so to speak, with that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Catholic, and I grew up Catholic, so I knew that the church was not in favor of contraception, and I knew that there were women who were anti-birth control, and I kind of just thought that they were really lucky women who had, really regular cycles and didn't experience any of the symptoms that I did. And so I thought, well, I mean, that's great for them, but they don't understand what it's like to live like this. And if they did, they wouldn't be anti-birth control. And I didn't realize, I'd heard of NFP, and I thought, well, that's just for, getting pregnant or not getting pregnant. And I didn't realize that there was this whole other aspect. I never heard the phrase fertility awareness. I didn't realize that you could use these methods. I didn't even really know that there were methods. I just thought it was, oh, here's when you ovulate within 28 days, here's when your period is. And that was it. So I didn't know that there were all these methods out there that would work for women like me who, didn't have a regular cycle, who had all these symptoms. I didn't know that there were options for identifying what was causing those symptoms and treating them. I just kind of thought, well, here's how, a lot of women have these issues and they go on the pill and then they feel great, and the end. And so I just thought that women who were against birth control just didn't understand what it was like. And I thought that they were just kind of really lucky women that lived without the pain and heavy bleeding and all this stuff that I was going through.
Yeah, and I'm sure that like left you in this place where you probably felt a little bit isolated because, like you're saying, you didn't know, or you just assumed that these other women had these perfect cycles and that that's why they weren't on birth control. But also what you're highlighting is just um, one of the reasons why I think we're so passionate about switching to the language of fertility awareness and moving away from natural family planning, because when you call it that, you really do limit access. Well, I'm not trying to have a family right now, so do I need this information? And yet, as you discovered later in your story, that this information is just basic knowledge about your body that really gives you the key to holistic health. um, but one of the things, kind of getting back into where you are in your story, so one of the things that stuck out to us when you were talking to us was that you actually felt better on birth control. And a lot of the things that we hear is the really negative side effects that women can experience on birth control, but you didn't really experience that. So tell us what healthy felt like while you were on birth control.
Yeah, healthy felt like, not dreading getting my period because it would incapacitate me with pain. It felt like my moods were more stable. I didn't have, the huge ups and downs of mood swings. I felt, I didn't have any of the side effects that you hear about with birth control that a lot of women experience. And so it never really occurred to me that there was another option that I might want, because like, why would I go off of birth control? I felt fine. Like all my problems were gone. And, sometimes I'd hear about like, oh, there's increased risks of, certain cancers. And I just would kind of push that into the back of my mind because I just felt like I had no choice, and I felt so much better. And I was like, well, I can't live like I used to live. I just can't. And so I would kind of try to not really think about potential long-term side effects. And then when I hear about short-term side effects, I'd be like, well, I don't have that problem. So, there's no issue.
So can you tell us what ultimately made you want to get off birth control? What happened? What did you learn? What was your experience that had you make the switch?
Yeah, well, so because I didn't really experience any of the side effects that make a lot of women switch off of birth control, for me, it was more of a religious reason. So I had spent a lot of years, nominally Catholic, but not really practicing my faith as much. And I started to get really back into practicing my faith, going back to going to mass every Sunday, all of those things. And I had also started dating the man who's my husband now, and he was a practicing Catholic. And so I kind of started thinking, well, we're both Catholic and we're both, trying to live by all the rules that the church teaches. So that means at some point, if we get married, we might not want me to be on birth control. And I've since learned that the church does say that it's okay to use birth control if it's for medical reasons. But I didn't know that then. And even if I had, I think I probably would have still tried to figure out like, well, what does the church offer? Because I don't think that the church wants us to suffer needlessly. So there has to be something. And I've been trying to think of when I started hearing more about fertility awareness and the different methods that are out there. And I think it was podcasts, actually. I started listening to a lot of Catholic podcasts, and it might have been like the Catholic Feminist or Letters to Women, maybe both of them, because I think they both had women on there to talk about this. And so I started kind of hearing about this and thinking, oh, well, maybe this is more than, like the rhythm calendar method. Maybe there is something out there. And I went off birth control once, and I was like super optimistic. And I was like, well, I'm older now, so maybe things will be more regular. And I remember like writing in my calendar, like, okay, well, 28 days from now, here's when I get my period. And it just like didn't happen. So I was like, okay, well, maybe my issues aren't gone just with age. And actually the first time I went off birth control, I ended up having like lots of mood swings and stuff. So I ended up going back on it and then continued kind of learning, hearing more about fertility awareness and these different NFP methods. And so I ended up going back off of it and contacting a Creighton instructor. I had started doing some research on the different methods, and I read about Creighton and the connection with NAPRO technology. And it seemed like that was a good method for if you do have some kind of medical problems, which at that point I was pretty convinced that there was something. I knew what I was experiencing wasn't normal. So I contacted a local Creighton instructor and started working with her. And that kind of helped me commit to staying off birth control. Because I was like, well, if I'm going to try to figure all of this out, then I obviously can't be on birth control, because you can't chart your cycle if you're not really having a real cycle. And so that it was hard. I remember talking to my therapist and I was like, yeah, I went off birth control. And she was like, they should make t-shirts warning people either just started birth control or I just got off of it. But it got a little bit easier to manage. And my Creighton instructor was looking at my charts as I was learning how to chart, and she noticed a few things like the long cycles, and I had what they call like double peaks. So it looked on my chart, it looked like I ovulated twice, which we know is not possible. So there were things like that. And so she referred me to a NAPRO doctor, and we had one. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we don't have any NAPRO doctors that I know of in the area now. We did then, but my instructor told me that she had such a long wait list that she actually referred me to one that was like an hour and a half away. And at first I was like, that's super inconvenient, but my best friend lives there. So I was like, well, I'll just visit with her after I go to the doctor. And if my best friend didn't live there, I would have continued to see this doctor because it was so worth it. I brought my charts and she asked me lots of questions, and she suspected PCOS. So she ordered all these tests, and it was just a completely different experience than what I'd gotten before. And I used to be kind of angry at my old gynecologist, and now I don't think she knew any better. Like, she was a lovely woman, and I think she cared about me as a patient. This is what I think most doctors are taught, is just to prescribe the pill. But anyway, this NAPRO doctor, she sent me in for blood work, and it was like the most intense blood work I've ever done. It was like, go on, these specific days of your cycle. The people at lab course like got to know me. They were like, oh, you're back. So it was a lot, like the process of diagnosis. But then she said, yeah, I think you have PCOS. And it's nice to have a diagnosis and an answer when, you've had all these weird things going on for, at that point, it had been like 10 years. Well, I've been on pill for 10 years. It's been even longer than that since I, had started menstruating. And so to finally kind of have an answer of like, oh, this is why my cycles are so long. This is why, all these things are happening. And so she recommended a few different ways to treat it. One was myo-inositol supplement. She prescribed progesterone for me to take in my luteal phase at the end of my cycle because I had low progesterone. She recommended a diet, which at first I was like, no, I'm not doing that, because it was no dairy, no gluten, no processed sugar. And I was like, that does not sound fun. But I ended up getting on that diet, and it made such a huge difference. I eventually got to where I was having like normal length cycles. And one of the weird effects of all of this that I didn't expect was actually like not related to PCOS as far as I know. And it's when I was 13, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. It was also the same year that I got my first period. So I don't know how much of this is hormonally related, because the timing seems a little coincidental to me, but that's just a theory I have. But anyway, so that's chronic pain and chronic fatigue basically are the two kind of hallmark symptoms. So I'd been dealing with that for a long time. And several months into this new diet and the new treatment for PCOS, I realized that I wasn't really feeling that anymore. Like the chronic pain, the chronic fatigue were mostly gone. And all of a sudden I just felt so healthy. And I realized that even though I thought that I felt great on the birth control pill, in comparison to how I felt before, I had never really known what it felt like to be healthy until now. And I mean, it's hard to give up gluten and dairy and sugar, but once you start feeling that much better than you've ever felt before, like I always tell people, because people will be like, oh, I could never do that. And I'm like, you think that, but if it made you feel really healthy for the first time in your life, you would do it. It makes it so much easier because it's life-changing. So yeah, we did that. And then that was less than a year off the pill, and all of that happened, which I think I got lucky as seeing such a good doctor so quickly. But then my cramping started coming back with my periods, and I was in a lot of pain. Like during my periods, I was in a lot of pain around ovulation. And so I went back to my doctor and she said, I think you might have endometriosis. This kind of sounds like it might be. And at first, when she said that, the pain was not that bad. And I was like, no, like I've heard about that. That's really bad. And then I remember one period, it was like so bad. I was calling my boyfriend, my husband now, and he was like bringing me over a heating pad. And I was like, I think she might be right. This is really bad. And at that point, I'd actually already scheduled my surgery for her to look, because that you diagnose it through laparoscopic surgery is really the only way or the best way to diagnose it. So we'd already scheduled that. So I was like, well, thank goodness, because this is not good. And yeah, so I went in for surgery and she found the endometriosis. She was trained in excision surgery, so she got it all out. And I found out later that I was pretty lucky that she was trained in excision surgery, because not a lot of doctors are. A lot of them do ablation surgery, which has a higher recurrence rate. And so anyway, all this to say, I just got very lucky with this doctor, because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to look for. And so, yeah, I just, after that, it was like all of these issues that I'd suffered from for so long were gone. And it wasn't like on the pill where they felt like they were gone, but they were still lingering in there, right? Like the pill did not get rid of the endometriosis. And so I just the first time in my life, I felt real, or at least the first time since I was a teenager, I felt just really healthy. And then I think the best outcome of all of this is that I was able to get pregnant, and my daughter was born in June, and she's wonderful and amazing. And I can't know what that journey would have been like, because by the time I got married, I was already, the endometriosis was gone, and my PCOS was under control. So I don't know what the journey of trying to get pregnant would have been like if I hadn't done all of that, but I think chances are good that it would have been really hard. So I am very grateful for the fact that I learned about this before I ever, even got engaged to my husband, which Emily, you were saying that the phrase natural family planning is a little bit not, I think, incomplete, I guess, that I think we do a disservice to women by, just especially in the church, by putting it in like marriage prep courses. And yes, it belongs there, but I think, you gotta learn about it sooner, especially if there's anything going on and like that you might need to get treated for, because
yeah. Your story highlights so much. Like there's just so much there. And yeah, I think it's, one of the things that can happen in the conversation about fertility awareness is that we do kind of ditch the pill, and it's like, no, we need to accept what it does. And it does relieve symptoms as you experienced. It absolutely does do that. And, but at the same time, it's not treating the underlying cause, and it's letting it fester. And so what so many women experience is that when they go on the pill and they do have that delay of diagnosis as a result, essentially, it does come up later in life. They will have to deal with it at some point, but that allowing it to sit and fester actually does create more problems. But yeah, it just highlights, first of all, the lack of informed consent that women have when they go on the pill, when they go on hormonal birth control. You're not given the what's the word I'm looking for? It's just, you're not treated as an individual. You're not treated as a unique person. It's not holistic care. It's not, let me get to know you. And also, you are like, it's not empowering. It's not telling you you are smart enough to learn to read your body, which is like, this is so against everything that we hear in conversations these days about like empowering women. What could be more empowering than learning the language of your body and using that information to advocate yourself with your medical care providers, in your relationships, and just in your day-to-day living, to understand what's going on and not to be treated with a one-size-fits-all symptom treatment, but to actually like dig in and like, let's get to the root of what's going on. And then it's just so fascinating that you saw a correlation between getting healthy and the minimization of your fibromyalgia symptoms. Like I'm so curious about that, kind of like you are. Like, what is there a link? And if so, like I can totally imagine it, because the more we learn about fertility awareness, the more we learn just how interconnected all of the systems of our body are. Our mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, physical health, it is all so intertwined. And yeah, it can just lead to, like you said, just feeling overall totally healthy. And I just, yeah, you covered so much. It just, there's so much there to unpack. So thank you for sharing that.
I want to add one more thing too, Emily. I just thought it was so interesting, because you're kind of like birth control's ideal patient, because you're one of the rare women who were able to take it. It got rid of your symptoms, but it didn't give you any other symptoms. So I think the average woman in that situation just kind of goes along just fine, thinking this is the treatment, this is as good as it's going to get. And it was the moral aspect that had you thinking of like, well, I got to find something else. Am I interpreting that correctly? Okay. And that kind of took you on another road to find an alternative, which ended up having you get off the birth control, as difficult as that transition was, right? Because you said that was a very difficult transition, which we have explained, like this is a lifestyle change, but it's also like, there's that other medical aspect as well. And here you are, going through that, but to get an even deeper healing. And I just think that's so cool. Am I correct in assessing it that way?
Yes, definitely. It never occurred to me to get off birth control for health reasons. Yeah. And Emily, I wanted to comment on what you were saying about like the holistic treatment, because that was one of the things that struck me when I went to see the NAPRO doctor, because she asked me so many questions about my health and things that I never would have thought to connect, because I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But I remember giving her my medical history, and then almost as an afterthought, I said, "Oh, and I'm hypoglycemic. I have low blood sugar." And later I found out like blood sugar is a huge thing with PCOS, having blood sugar problems. And so, but for me, it was just like, oh yeah, and there's this other thing. But for her, that was like one more piece to the puzzle, because she was. Oh no, I remember it was because she was going to have me do a glucose test, and I was like, "Oh, I've done one of those before," and she was like, "That's important information." But it was just, that she was able to connect all of those dots that none of my other providers had ever been able to connect before, because I honestly just don't think they were trained to. But she looked at, all of the different pieces of my health and put them together. And then as I learned more about PCOS, I was like, oh yeah, this is something that impacts so many different pieces of your health that it makes sense that I'd never been diagnosed with it before, because people they're not taught to look at all of that.
Yeah, it is such a different approach to healthcare. And that is something that, like you said, you experience. It's difficult, like it's much more difficult, because when I talk with women who are pursuing NAPRO technology, it's are pursuing holistic care, it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot like, let's try this and see if it works. And then if it doesn't, so it's like there's a lot of room to be discouraged when you're going through this process, because you're learning a complex system of your body, which is learnable, but then you're also taking that information. Okay, so I can use this information as a diagnostic tool, but it's not an exact science, because your fertility is always in flux. There's always new things going on, because it's constantly responding to everything in your life. And everything in your life is always changing. And so it can be a very frustrating process, totally worth it, but very frustrating process. And I'm so grateful that you highlighted those aspects, because it's so important, not just, again, we want fully informed consent, right? Like, understand what you're getting into. This is not something where you go into the doctor's office you give a list of symptoms and you walk out with a pill that fixes everything. This is, you go into the doctor's office, you do an evaluation. Okay, here's, based on my experience, here's some things I think we should start looking into. Let's run some tests. Let's start digging. Let's try these adjustments and see how it goes. Come back for a follow-up, and then we'll make adjustments from there, which is such a much different approach. It's longer, it's more expensive. And I think really what this is bringing to the forefront, this is bringing up a lot of issues with the way, you mentioned it, that medical doctors are just not trained to make these connections. They should be. They should be. And now, we are starting to experience the negative side effects of our doctors not understanding, not being taught in medical school, the way that our bodies works, the way that our fertility works. It's, so that's a whole other ball of wax, but I think that it really just kind of brings those types of things up. Yeah, it's a good story.
Yeah, I'm experiencing some of that now. Like you were saying, that your life changes, and so your hormonal health changes, because I'm my daughter's 5 months old as we're recording this, and so I'm 5 months postpartum, and I had to wean her off of breast milk when she was quite young. So I've been not doing that for a while, but anyway, but I'm charting, and, I saw some weirdness in my charts. So I have been working with a nurse practitioner who's trained in FEMM, and I saw her, and it was exactly like what you said. Like, I told her everything that was going on, and she said, okay, well, here's a few different ways we can approach this. I went in for a ton of blood work. I'm seeing all the results with my hormones. These are normal, these are low, whatever. And, I've had moments where I'm like, gosh, it would be so much easier to just go on the pill. Like, this would be so much easier. I have a baby. I don't really have time to go get blood work. I don't have time to deal with this stuff, but it's just so much better though, because I'm like, well, if I have, wonky hormones, like, I want to know about it, and I want to know why, and I want to actually fix them. And so it's worth taking the time to try to figure it out. And it was such an empowering experience to go in and talk to her as a FEMM instructor now, because I had, the language to say, here's what's going on. I could have a conversation with her and say, like, here's what I'm seeing. She could tell me, here's what I think. And I just have such an understanding of, here's what my body's supposed to be doing. Here's what's healthy. Here's where I'm deviating from that. So now I can have a conversation with my provider about, like, okay, well, let's figure out why my body's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, and then let's try to correct it. And so, yeah, it would be so much easier to take the pill,
but too much.
I know too much now. And, I was telling my husband recently, like, even if we weren't Catholic, if I still knew what I knew, I wouldn't go on the pill, because it's just, yeah, I know too much. I know too much. And I know what it's like to be healthy. And I know that there's answers that I can find now, and I want to find them. I want to actually get treated for anything that's causing problems. I don't want to just push it under a rug anymore.
Isn't that the thing too? This is just about being informed, like, it's not about being Catholic or not Catholic or anything like that. This is just good for women's health. It's good. It's healthy for women. So throwing the faith thing in there, it's great for that aspect too, but it also has everything to do with it. It has nothing to do with it. It's just good for women. So it's just so interesting now that you're on this side of it, you can see that so clearly. But kind of jumping back, Emily and I are curious to know, what would you have wanted to hear back then when you first got on birth control, based on what you know now?
I think, first of all, I would have wanted an acknowledgement that birth control can help improve your life. Like, it can make you feel better, and, you can take it, and your life might be a lot better. But I would have wanted to hear a but to that. And I would have wanted to hear that the birth control pill is not going to actually figure out what's wrong, and it's not going to treat it. And someday you might want a baby. And if you have conditions that might prevent that from happening, they're just going to fester under birth control. And then you're going to have to start all over again and try to figure out what's wrong. I would have wanted to hear that, that there are methods that you can learn to figure out why you're having a long cycle. And then you can figure out why you're having a long cycle and try to treat it. I would have wanted to learn that charting your cycle can actually, even while it's long, sometimes you can still use that to kind of plan your life a little bit, because you can, even if you're ovulating unpredictably or not ovulating, sometimes there's still things that you can see and you can be like, well, my period might be coming, even if it's not like 28 days from the last one, and I mean, that alone is helpful just in, planning ahead. I think I would have wanted to hear like, yes, the cramping is going to hurt and it's going to continue hurting while you figure out why you're having these really painful periods. But once you figure it out, you can get help and that it's worth the wait. So I think an acknowledgement that birth control does make life easier, and it can, for a lot of women, like make life more pleasant and less painful. And yet it's worth getting off of the pill, because once you're finding answers, it's a huge relief. And that healing that you end up getting is it's better than the pill.
Yeah. It sounds like it's very much like a both and, like, let's acknowledge, and essentially what it is let's acknowledge the truth. However difficult it is to accept, let's just acknowledge the truth, both about birth control and about fertility awareness, right? That yes, it can give you so many benefits, but also it is going to cost you something. It's going to require some effort, and it's not always going to be easy. And one of the reasons why it's not easy is because you are literally every day coming face to face with something that might not be right, or something that might need to be fixed. And that's difficult. And with birth control, it's like, you don't have to look at that, like you, it's not there. And that, so there is like, one of the things that I think we need to focus on more within the fertility awareness conversation is the mental health aspect of it, the mental strain of charting and coming face to face with PCOS and endometriosis in chart form on a cycle to cycle basis, and not just once a cycle when you experience those that severe pain or PMS or so on and so forth, but just every day you're coming face to face with that. And that's difficult. It's not easy at all, but getting to the root of that problem is worth it. And as difficult as it is, it's like, it does help. And I found out that I had like low functioning thyroid, but I was noticing like severe mood swings and those types of things. So not like nothing severe yet. But I was like, this isn't right. I know this isn't right. Like, I think this also helps to change the cultural language around things like PMS and pain around your period, that we're like, oh, this is just part of being a woman. It's like fertility awareness says, no. This means that something is not right. This is not how a healthy cycle makes you feel. And, that's just all very helpful information. So the fact that I knew that like my mood swings were like indicative of something was wrong actually led me to getting my thyroid levels checked. And sure enough, I had low functioning thyroid. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like something that impacts my daily life. And I was able to make that part better. Even though I was using this originally for family planning purposes, it had like these tremendous impacts on health. I'm loving this conversation, and I want to just sit here and like talk with you like all afternoon. But I want to wrap this up, and this is the question that we're giving to all of our guests just to kind of conclude each episode. We want to get your elevator pitch for fertility awareness. So if you just had, the proverbial elevator ride with somebody, what would you tell them about fertility awareness?
I would tell them that fertility awareness is hard, but you're worth that effort. Your health is worth that effort. Your physical health, your mental health. It's worth the challenges that come with fertility awareness. It's worth, coming off the pill. It's worth making that investment of time and mental energy into yourself, because you don't have to suffer needlessly. The normal woman's body is yeah, it's meant to suffer a little bit, but the what we've accepted as normal for our bodies is unacceptable. And fertility awareness gives you an alternative that will bring you so many answers and so much healing that, yeah, you got to invest in yourself.
Well, Taryn, thank you so much. It does not get much better than that elevator pitch. That was pretty solid. So thank you for that and for all of the rich information and experience that you shared with us today. We couldn't be more grateful for having you here. Where can our friends who are listening to us find you online?
My blog is everydayroses.blog. And I'm actually have a page on there. I've started adding my own just favorite fertility awareness resources just because I like sharing. And I'm also on social media, Instagram, Twitter. My handle is Taryn M. DeLong, and Facebook is Everyday Roses.
Awesome. So we're going to put that information in the show notes. Thank you, Taryn, again for joining us. And thank you to all of you at home for following along and listening to our show. Please subscribe to our podcast and give us a review if you have a chance. Also, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. And until next time, we'll see you guys later. Have a great day.